I'll start out. I'm going to give a brief kind of 1-minute introduction of the panelists, and then each of the panelists is going to talk for a few minutes about their organizations, their companies, what they do. And then once we're through with that, I will start out with a question for all the panelists. I really would like to open up this conversation to the audience to be as interactive as possible. So my questions will be limited. But let me first start by, on my extreme right, Mr. Alfredo Reyes-Kraft is the founding partner and chairman of Lex Informatica Abogados. Did I say that right? Oh, great. Which is a law and consulting firm that offers consultation in information rights, intellectual property, privacy, and information security. He's also an executive vice president at AMPICI, which is the Internet Mexican Association, and also a member of the Telecommunications Law Institute. He has all kinds of accomplishments to his credit, but I will let him share more of those with you. Next to Alfredo is Jay Haynes, thank you, who is the CEO of eCentire, a Canadian company that provides mid-sized enterprises with advanced cybersecurity capabilities. And Jay has led eCentire to 20 times its size since he joined the company in 2010. I'm really interested in a little bit about how you did that. But maybe that's for another panel. And then to my right is Terry Williams, who is a director of the USTA, Institute for Economic Development, Small Business Development Center, Procurement Technical Assistance Center. Try saying that fast. 5 times. Terry's responsible for managing staff in federal, state, and privately funded programs that are focused on assisting small businesses in contracting with the federal, state, and local governments, as well as the private sector. Terry is a certified economic developer and also chairperson of the South Central Texas Regional Certification Agency and a member of the Texas Economic Development Council, among others. So with that, I'd like to open it up to our distinguished panel to talk a little bit more about your organizations. Terry, I'll start with you.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'd like to say good morning to everyone and thank the organization for having me. Just one correction, UTSA, it's the University of Texas at San Antonio. All of my career has been in San Antonio, Texas, but I've had opportunities to participate at a national level as well as local and state levels on other initiatives and opportunities. One such initiative, of course, is why we're here this morning, is cybersecurity awareness for small business. Our funding sources for all of our programs, except for one, comes from the federal government, comes from the Department of Defense, the Small Business Administration, from the state of Texas, and then lastly, one of our programs is funded by J.P. Morgan Chase Foundation. So our program, and this is our second year that we've instituted a program on small business cybersecurity awareness, and that's funded in particularly by the Small Business Administration. So we've incorporated that program into our Small Business Emergency Preparedness Program and Business Continuity Program. And in the back, as well as at the front registration table, I have information panel cards on that program as well. These programs are part of the Small Business Development Centers. Small Business Development Centers, which I feel really has, if you will, the answer as to how to engage small and medium enterprises in this effort. We have a network of over 1,000 centers or offices across the United States, 4,500 advisors in all of those centers, as well as what we've instituted at the University of Texas. We have an agreement with the U.S. State Department, and we've also instituted SBDC, Small Business Development Centers, at an international level. We have started SBDCs in 20 countries, 68 centers so far in those countries, which include a lot of the South American countries and the South Caribbean countries. So there are 68 SBDCs through agreements with the State Department and the ministerial governments of those countries. In 2016, we are poised to launch 103 more centers in those particular countries. And they include Mexico, it includes Brazil, Guatemala, Costa Rica, and many, many, many others. So that's our linkage to the international part and how we continue to try to engage small and medium sized businesses.
Thank you.
So I'm with eCentire, and the reason we've grown so fast is because we serve the mid-market, and there's a vacuum there. Not a lot of firms focus on the mid-market. I'll come back to that. But the headlines tend to drive awareness, and Panama leaks. Every month there's something new coming out about that. So law firms all of a sudden are very, very attuned to it, and financial hacks are so common. eCentire is what's technically called a managed security service provider. We have an advanced tradecraft that we bring to the equation, but we basically take on the responsibility for the customer, the primary security function for the customer, and that is. It's not for the weak of heart, because you're constantly under attack and 24/7, time zones all over the world. But it's interesting, as we've grown, we have about 700 customers now. The amount of threat intel that we gather in our primary markets informs us in very interesting ways. I'll go into that in a second. Our markets are principally mid-sized financial services. In the U.S., there's a category called registered investment advisors. So this would be like hedge funds, private equity firms, the 1%, or the 1% of the 1%. Investment banking, REITs, and insurers, and many others in that category. We also have legal. We have IP-based firms, which will include biopharma all the way to software, healthcare, so quite a wide range. The biggest market, though, is financial services, and it continues to grow the fastest for us. The aperture that we have, about 75% of our traffic is coming from that category. We're securing about $3.2 trillion of assets under management as the primary security firm. So it's been interesting that we have more threat intel on who's attacking that market in the U.S. than the U.S. regulators or law enforcement. So we've developed some interesting relationships as a result. And despite, and I talk about this all the time, despite the the tendency to bring Hollywood and CSI, it's pretty mundane, opportunistic cybercrime. That's what we got to come to terms with. 99% of the traffic is ranging from ransomware or non-targeted phishing. But because these firms don't have anybody with a security function 24/7, and by the way, it takes 10 people to do that continuously, they have 5 people in IT in a 1,000-person firm, and they're not worrying about security. It's half of one person's job. So you can't have eyes on glass 24/7. You can't investigate all of the alerts that the technologies generate. So this is sort of what the challenge is for mid-size enterprise. You have now a very great awareness. Target, I would say, being the watershed event that showed how your supply chain can be the weakest link into your security. They had a very sophisticated security organization, but the HVAC vendor from Philadelphia didn't, and that's how the bad guys snuck in. So as a result of that, regulators have escalated pressure on executives in the mid-sized supply chain to start taking it a little more seriously. In 2014, the SEC sent out, and we'll contrast this to how it happens in Canada. They sent out a document sweep request to select firms that said, you got to answer these 28 questions in 14 days or face a $5 million fine or 20 years in jail. So boom, they got everyone's attention. It's sort of shock therapy. In Canada, we send out, a survey document that sort of first starts with sorry. If you don't mind, could you fill this out? But I mean, that's typical everywhere else in the world. But what's happened as a result of that is this 28 questions in this particular segment, this is true in others, has served to sort of become a standard. So we've converted into a compliance like chart. And when we go to other jurisdictions all over the world, we're in 40 countries, anyone interconnecting with their counterparties in the US, or they have a domicile here, is going to that as the highest standard. If you look at how data processing environments work, they're all commingled. You can't separate the data that's in the UK or Canada from the US. So what they do is just go to this highest standard so they could sustain a favorable outcome through an audit. So we find that quite fascinating, and it has been certainly driving our business abroad as well. If we get into specifically what mid-sized firms can and can't do, there's a whole category of cybersecurity capabilities we would call prevention technology. And that would be, start with firewalls and antivirus appliances, now there's intrusion detection, and on and on. And having a stack of that we call defense in depth. No matter how good your prevention capabilities are, and it doesn't matter if you're JPMC or the military, the bad guys who are very talented but morally corrupt will figure out a way around it. So you've got to understand that there's only so much prevention you can do, and come to terms with the fact that stuff is going to leak through. And that's what we built this business to do. We catch what leaks through, and we intervene on it so that it doesn't become, I think in context of the previous panel, a business altering or disrupting event. So it's basically clean up in aisle 6, 24/7 in our business, and we're constantly dealing with these attackers and minimizing dwell time. A lot of folks don't understand. When you read these reports about the 250-day to detection, that's because nobody had an ability to detect, and most of those are learned through outside organizations, 90% in some cases. And certainly in the mid-market, we would have our friends in the agencies and the certs saying, hey, by the way, you got some bad traffic in there. Your IP showed up in this log that we got. So it's important to understand that particular context. There's another thing that we've also found in terms of how we look at our response. It's through various activities we've done with law enforcement. They still tend to break it down to means, motive, and opportunity as the main drivers. And a lot of people don't appreciate the sort of the underworld online, or the dark web as we often call it. Every hacking tool that has a high degree of success is largely available either as a service or in source code format. You could take an 8-hour YouTube training. You can basically go from nothing to an effective hacker in very short order. We would submit 40 hours if you had some bit of a technical background. So what happens is you have well-educated people in disadvantaged parts of the world, $27 a day driving a taxi in Bucharest, and they hear about their pal who went to the dark side and he made 50 or 100 grand in a couple weeks worth of work. The motive is there. And then the biggest challenge that we have as law enforcement, even though we have 98 cooperating Interpol countries, you can't get boots on the ground with a prosecutable warrant in any meaningful time. It's typically 6 to 9 months. And these guys are gone in a matter of days. So this is the challenge. The firms have to defend themselves. If you talk to the folks in, say, the FBI, the list of things that they can respond to with their limited resources is fairly short, yet they've got a very long list of incidents. So this is a challenge with law enforcement around the world. It's incumbent on organizations to take these matters into their own hands. The challenge that we have is the rate at which the success, due to the multiplier effect of they told 2 friends and then each of them told 2 friends and so forth, is causing the rate of hacking that's having monetary success to rise at an exponential function. Yet the rate at which we're training human cybersecurity professionals is fairly flat. So these curves are diverging, and while large enterprise is very capable of solving that problem themselves, the mid-market isn't. And now they are pushing their regulatory pressures to their supply chain. So you will see law firms now really engaging. As an example, all the big law firms work with financial institutions. Financial institutions are getting audited. They're pushing the audit requirements. The term is DDQ. I don't know if anyone in here has lived through a DDQ, but some of the banks would have 1,000 audit points, and it can shut down your IT department. So trying to be prepared just to be able to continue to stay in business. And it's, you know, it's kind of, it works to the extent, you know, the two men in the bear. You don't have to be faster than the bear, just the other guy. So if your suppliers are able to mount a reasonable degree of efficacy in their cyber defenses and detection capabilities, then there's a good chance that that will be enough of a deterrent for the bad guys. Some of the stuff that we do deal with that is a little interesting, and I'm going to bring in some of the threat sharing. We've been with FSISAC, with the Financial Services Information Sharing Analysis Center, for about 4 years now. We were the first service provider that was sort of let inside, and we share a lot of information with them. We're one of the, as we heard on the previous panel, there's a lot of people receiving, not too many contributing. We're one of the very active contributors. One of the things that we contributed in November of 2013 was a bunch of threat intel related to what became known as FIN4. And it was shared amongst the community. Now, FIN4, for those you probably don't know, but this was a group of threat actors that were getting access to pre-public information and front-running trades. So basically, embargoed information in the hands of law firms, and hedge funds, public relations firms. And it was a perfect victimless crime. The strategy of the hedge fund might be to make 50 million. These guys make 40. They make 40, and then 10 goes to the threat actors. And this went on for several years. Apparently, few responded to that. They ultimately caught them in September of 2015, and they claimed that they made over 100 million in this scheme that had gone on for years. So we do see some of those. And we had North Korea and a 100-person asset manager in New York City. Now, what North Koreans are doing in there, nobody knows. FBI is scratching their head. Could be that they have a SWIFT system and there's a way to maybe monetize it and make money. But those are rare for us. It's mostly opportunistic threat actors, ransomware. That's what we normally see. So I will pause there and hand it over to the next.
Thank you, Jay. Okay, Alfredo.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you for the invitation. My English is not good, but I try to explain. My name is Alfredo Reyes. I'm a lawyer. I work before in 27 years in the financial sector. I'm now a partner of Lex Informatica, an IT law firm. I'm vice president of the Mexican Internet Association, AMIPSI, which integrates the companies that represent an influence of the development of the internet industry in Mexico. Every year, AMIPSI undertakes the task of carrying out studies based on the use of internet in Mexico to guide and promote market growth. As industry association, we are involved to know and understand the cybersecurity challenges of our partners, but the most important, the Mexican society and economy. Nowadays, the small and medium businesses are very important for the core of Mexican economy. However, these kind of enterprises are not pretty involved with their cyber security problems. Mexican Internet Association works strongly side by side with the government, citizen, industry, small and medium enterprises, and non-profit organizations in order to support the e-commerce and the security of the internet stakeholders. The growth of the internet has been the biggest social and technological change of our lifetime. It is a massive force of God in the world, in the way it drives growth, reduces barriers to trade, and allows people across the world to communicate and cooperate. At the same time, our increasing dependence on cyberspace has brought new risk where the key data and systems on which we know really can be compromised or damaged in ways that are hard to detect or defend against. Once a person has been the victim of online crime, the impact on his life can be extensive. Cybercrime has cost that go beyond the financial. Consumers around the world lost an average 21 hours over the past year dealing with the fallout from online crime, and nearly more than $300 on average per person, enough for a years of home security. It's important. Thank you very much.
No,
Okay, more?
keep going, absolutely.
In Mexico, there are 65.8 million internet users, 59% of the population. 77% is connected, though on a smartphone, only 69% on a PC. Internet dissemination among the individuals is more or less 53%. More than the 70% of internet users has only been using the network for about 5 years. The main reason to connect for the first time was to look the information on the networks and secondly, to use. The principal barriers to access the internet today are a slow connection, 30%, technical problems with the company, 26%, and high cost, 25%. However, 38% have never suffered any problems. Activities. The main activity performed by internet user is social networks, about 18%. Surprising above of sending and receive mails and instant messages. Other lesser users are watching movies, streaming series, 96%, online playing, 96%, visiting sites, it's 95%, or downloading movies, series, music, podcast, 94%. Within the professional usage, it includes negotiations with the government, taxes and other things, 37%, training, 31%, and job searching, 30%. Among the mentioned activities before, on the next 12 months, the expectations will be the increasing of online courses, 37%, online shopping, 33%, also the increasing use of social network, movies and TV shows, streaming, information browsing and delivery, receiving emails and or instant messages. Having access to the internet has changed the habits of 90% of the internet users, such as the way how we listen to music, watch movies, and interpersonal relationships. Most of the users get online while being home, 87%, followed by the mobility allowed of smartphones and other devices, 52%, which has one strong presence, and lastly, the works places, 38%. Technology to access Wi-Fi, it's mainly by contract, 84%, followed by contract mobile data plan, 27%, and public Wi-Fi places, 26%. Mexicans spend about 7 hours and 14 minutes online per day. 1 hour and 32 minutes more than the shown in the past study. In the case of online sales, The majority of online sales are from within Mexico, and 3 out of 4 online sales via PC. Retailers report an average on 5% chargebacks. It's important, chargebacks. The top 4 categories sold online are apparel, sports, electronics, and other categories. The large number of incidences is not listed other categories, indicates the diversification that the e-commerce offers. By sales value, excluding travel, the top 4 categories and other categories not listed: consumer electronics, computers, peripherals, PDAs, and event tickets. Retailers expect shopping to increase around the El Buen Fin, Christmas, and Hot Sale. Almost 9 in 10 retailers are aware of the AMIPSI trust mark, but only 2 in 5 offer the trust mark on their site. Almost all retailers are aware of the El Buen Fin. The Buen Fin is something similar to Black Friday, and Hot Sale is something similar as Cyber Monday events. The online stores, most retailers use a website or online store, self-operated. These sites accept most major payment types, including credit and debit cards, PayPal, and bank transfer. Almost all accept Visa or MasterCard. 3 in 5 retailers have a mobile application. Most retailers engage in a variety of online marketing efforts, including offering sales and promotions. The security and the warranty of receiving your money is the main concern of the retailers. This is the more principal statistics about internet.
Thank you very much. This is a question for the audience. Does anyone know how many hours U.S. citizens are online? I heard 7 hours and 14 minutes in Mexico. Huh?
It's a lot.
Are we higher, you think? Interesting. Somebody can Google that while I'm asking other questions. Yeah. Yeah.
I would actually say, if you use the phrase "go online," you just dated yourself. Because those of us in our generation, we used to actually connect, and we remember that squawky sound from our modem. Anybody less than 20, there's no such thing as being online or offline. Your phone is online.
Right. Right.
You are connected.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a good point. Actually, I just caught myself when I was saying Google that. I should say search, right?
Yes.
Although Google, I'm sure, would like that. Okay, so let me, thank you very much for those remarks. It certainly sounds like all of your companies and organizations have a lot of capabilities and capacity to support small and medium-sized business enterprises with this problem. And I think, Jay, you talked about your sweet spot is typically 1,000 or so, employee companies.
Yeah, 20 to 1,000.
Oh, okay. So your range is
go all the way down. Yeah.
okay. Great. So I'll start with you, Terry. But I'd like to hear, and I'm actually going to start with one of the questions that was framing this panel, which is, what challenges are you seeing as you work with these small and medium-sized business enterprises in your area that they're facing in cybersecurity? And if you have any percentage of those or numbers that are actually doing business internationally, what kinds of issues are you hearing them raise?
I don't particularly have the international numbers, but what they face in cybersecurity is not unlike anything else that they face just being small business owners. The challenges of resources, the challenges of capacity, the challenge of training their employees, whether they are a 2-person operation or a 500-person operation. One of the ways that we try to prevent that or try to assist with that is through preventive measures, through first engaging them through outreach. and utilizing some of our other partner organizations. Currently, we have a database of clients just in our network alone of over 12,000 business owners. And that, again, varies from either the 2-person operation to the 500 or 800-person operation. So that first step is outreach, getting them in, getting them to understand the importance of cybersecurity preventive maintenance, if you will. Secondly is education. Of course, we are an educational institution, but this is a little different than just academic type education, but education in the form of training, in the form of what exactly do they need to know, and then how do they do it. We find the next step, we throw out a lot of information as to what they need to do, but their particular challenge is, okay, I know all of this, I know what I need to do, how do I do it? You know, how exactly do I set up this firewall? How exactly do I, what software do I purchase? How exactly do I set up the network? What they need next is the how-to. And then thirdly, advising and one-on-one assistance. So that comes in with the how-to. Actually sitting down with them, actually providing that training to their employees, actually including that in an employee handbook. We also provide HR management assistance in the form of an employee handbook. So incorporating that information, what employees need to know about cybersecurity, and then really kind of putting it in layman terms. Usually when we talk to them about cybersecurity, using that term, you get the deer in the headlights look, okay? It's you know, goes way over here, and then they stop listening. So putting it in layman's terms as to what is allowable for their employees to, as far as utilizing their computers, as far as utilizing the internet, who actually needs access to it, so that all of their employees knows what's allowable, what's not allowable. And then when they find someone who's not following that rule, then something needs to be enforced, okay? Something needs to be done, and having a policy on that as well. So our plan is to actually sit down once we've brought them in through the outreach, then once we've done the education through the training workshops, through webinars, through our SBDC Global Network, which reaches out at an international level to train clients as well as advisors. So once we have done that, then the follow-up takes place as far as the one-on-one, bringing them. I have a staff just covering the San Antonio area of 12 counselors and advisors. So making one-on-one appointments with them as far as, okay, what our next step is the how-to, is following up and making sure that the client or the business owner has actually done the how-to, because if they don't get to the how-to, all of the education and the training and the stats is useless, means nothing. So what we're trying to do is actually help develop suppliers, help develop them as suppliers who are cybersecurity ready, because we know these things typically don't trickle down, they trickle up, if you will, from the small business to the targets, to those that are suppliers to targets through financial systems, through other means that they are integrating themselves as suppliers to the larger businesses. There are also federal requirements. Earlier was mentioned the procurement technical assistance centers. There are over 100 of those centers, several centers sometimes in each state, that assist those who want to contract with the federal government. Well, as you know, there's a DFAR supplement. I'm going to throw out some numbers here. Supplement .204-7012. I'm just anal like that, I remember that, okay? But that supplement requires those that are currently doing business with the federal government, as well as those that intend to do business with the federal government, to meet certain standards to control classified and unclassified information. So they have, currently they have, these businesses have until December of 2017 to comply with that rule. So we are educating businesses on that rule as well, because we deal with a lot of them that are contracting with the federal government to help them either become compliant or meet that rule by 2017.
Thank you. Jay, would you like to take a?
Yeah, I could, from a different perspective, one of the challenges is it's all cost. Everything in cybersecurity, there's no ROI. It's quite a challenge. Most business investments are have got some kind of ROI. So it's, you know, as the attacker, you have to be right once, and as a defender, you have to be right 100% of the time. So it's all downside if you're not correct. So it's a very unbalanced battleground that you're in. So what we have found, so the cost is controlled by the C-suite, and when you show up to a cybersecurity meeting with a director of technology, you're talking zeros and ones and speeds and feeds and all this packet cap. Like it devolves very quickly into a very technical world, and the C-suite kind of glazes over. What you have to do is convert it into a risk management discussion, and they manage risk across all different dimensions depending on the businesses they're in. Some are international, some are environmental, health, place, work, and safety. There's a long list. So you can monetize risk, and you can transfer some of it to insurance, although limited, and then you can put certain risk mitigation strategies in place internally. And you could spend $500,000 or $2 million, and you may get exactly the same results. That's sort of the challenge I was talking about earlier with prevention. It doesn't work anymore. So it's really, then it gets down to a question of where should you be spending your money for a certain amount of risk mitigation. So I think that's the trend that we're going to see. This is very mature at the sort of Fortune 500 world, but in the SMEs, they've not had a cyber risk discussion before, and they haven't had it in monetary terms, and it's challenging. It's not easy to put a dollar figure on it, but that's, I think, where it has to go.
Thank you. Alfredo?
Thank you very much. The most important topics in cybercrime scenario for small and medium businesses nowadays, I think, are economic resources to invest in security tools, hardware, ransomware, vulnerabilities of hardware and software, payment systems, attacks through employee system or employee steals of information, cloud services, security access and configurations, wearables, warehouse of stolen data, integrity, cyber espionage, sharing threat intelligence. The main actions to be taken for the regulation and prevention of these problems, I think they are to promote collaboration between governments, entities, industry, and the CERTs in order to protect the enterprises of the cybercrime menaces effectively. To correctly balance of the citizen and individual's rights as freedom of expression and privacy, preventing the over-regulation. St. Thomas says you can sin by excess or by defect. It's the over-regulation. It's bad, like the less regulation. To notify internet users about the vulnerabilities of their data. The comprehensive notification. International diplomacy to collaborate between governments in order to face cybercrime risk as a unit. On the other hand, the regulation must focus in avoiding restrictive copyright and intellectual property legislation which criminalize directly to the users. Implement the notice and takedown procedures as mandatory for small enterprises, which will have acquired the obligation of scrutinizing the user's behavior. To not obligate enterprises to get backdoors and open their networks to the government, protecting the privacy of the users. To not obligate the enterprises to prosecute once hacking activity is detected. Otherwise, they must be able to rely and be supported by the authorities. The new challenges for the international regulations and authorities are create new regulations in regards of cybercrime activities, which includes illegal access to hardware and software, denial of services, identity theft, phishing, network hacking, personal data selling, and hacktivists. Arturo talked about the Budapest cybercrime. No? In conclusion, the Mexican Internet Association works strongly side by side with the government, citizens, industry, small and medium enterprises, and non-profit organizations in order to support the e-commerce and the security of the Internet stakeholders.
Thank you. I want to pick up on a comment that I think, Jay, you raised it, and Terry, I think you were talking in the context of educating small and medium-sized businesses, but about changing the conversation from one of it being a technical-only problem to a risk management problem. And I think we heard earlier the Deputy Secretary talk about the creation of the Cybersecurity Framework that NIST led, you know, in collaboration with government and industry. And so, and that's a frame that really speaks to that issue. I'm curious to hear, in your interactions with small businesses and in your countries, what types of best practices kind of govern. You talked about your 28 questionnaire, but kind of at the national level, what are you doing if you are in fact, you know, using any elements of the framework? If you have your own. If you could talk a little bit about that and how those apply to small and medium business enterprises in this context of risk management.
Yeah, I can start with that. There are many frameworks out there. There's really two categories. One are the prescriptive ones, like ISO 27000. Some of you might have heard that. Basically, it lays out what you have to do at various levels of maturity. And then NIST, which is a much more adaptive. It allows you to recognize your particular business issues and adapt to that. So we actually advocate NIST, which I don't know if you do as well. It's very well adopted globally. So so for us, NIST is a good framework. And the challenge a lot of people, you know, that are new, you can't start from zero and go to full competency or your best practices overnight. At least doing it internally, you can bring in outside firms and achieve that quicker. But it still takes time and process and rigor. You know, it starts with you need to have at the board level, you need to have a cybersecurity policy, and many firms don't have that. Once you have a policy, you can measure against it, and where we see best practices is having a committee of the board that opines on this and might present quarterly, at least annually, somewhat like the audit committee, very parallel to that. So how do you how do you measure yourself? You can do it in risk management jargon, but you also have to. There's a technical assessment, sort of an audit level that you could have third parties look at, and that's where we would advocate a NIST framework most often, and then you compare yourself to your progress on your plan with that framework.
Terry, what are you seeing? Are your small businesses even aware of the framework?
Well, okay, I'm going to give a shout out again to Adam Sedgwick with NIST. Actually, we all kind of just left a annual conference, the America's SBDC conference that was held last week in Orlando, Florida, in which there were 3 sessions, particularly on cybersecurity, and we actually got to share some of the best practices that were being utilized by the other SBDCs around the country. One in particular, Michigan's SBDC, Small Business Development Center, is utilizing an assessment type of questionnaire that they've developed. Another, what I would consider best practice, one thing I failed to mention earlier is that the services that all the SBDCs provide is at no cost because of the funding mechanisms through the federal government. So all of these services that's provided to small businesses, they don't have to pay anything because, again, of the funding mechanisms. So one of the things that we'll be advocating, because it's, in my mind, in layman terms, is the document that NIST provides, and that can be found on their website as well. And then another best practice, if you have partnerships with a university, most universities have computer science departments. Some of them, like ours, we have a cybersecurity infrastructure and assurance, a Center for Infrastructure and Assurance Security. Actually was ranked the #1 cybersecurity department in the country. So we will be partnering with them to provide the technical assessments to the small businesses. So that actually gives an additional step, if you will, as a best practice, is to form that partnership with that local either university or organization that can take it to the next level and actually do that technical assessment.
In Mexico, in the universities, we have specialties and diplomates and master's degree in security. But we have too many frameworks and good practices, but not all enterprises know them and apply them. We use the framework of APEC, ISO 2700, it's 100, PCI for the financial sector. We have Mexican specific norms about security with NICE, with a Mexican organization, and we are talking about that. We capacite the personnel. The INAI, National Data Protection Institute in Mexico, are working about these themes, and other economy minister are working about that. And like Mexican Association of Internet, we are working to promote educational models about security for the enterprise.
Okay, I'd like to open it up to the audience. Any questions or comments? This lady in the middle here.
Thank you. Nina Collars, unaffiliated. Jay, you mentioned that that your organization shares with FSISAC, and you said that there's this problem of information sharing, which is that there's a lot of taking but not a lot of giving back. So what explains why your organization does so? And so who do you see as the primary givers of information, and who tends to hold back?
Well, with FSISAC, there's about 5,000 members. It was started by banks, insurance companies, and payment processors, and it's expanded well beyond the U.S. Actually have offices in the U.K. as well as Canada, probably other parts of the world. Part of the challenge is firms don't have a threat intel capability, so it's hard to give a lot of meaningful, actionable threat intel back. That's what we do all day long, so it's easy for us. Most of the large banks would have, besides their daily security operations team, they'd have an advanced threat research team, so they too would have those capabilities. So I think the number, the last I heard was 15% are contributors in FS-ISAC. So that's still good. It's 15% probably represent higher bias to those more advanced firms. We believe in the mission. If you go back to the antivirus world, all those firms shared a lot more information. The cyber community today is far more competitive and proprietary, but the threat sharing still goes on at a lesser level, but the ISACs are encouraging it. One of the things that I find a challenge, like in an international venue, is the threat actors don't see borders, they just see opportunities. So we should be far more bilateral in terms of that threat sharing. FS-ISAC should be, and in fact is in Canada, what all of our big financial institutions use, among many other feeds. You can get, the FS-ISAC membership, I'm guessing is something like $20,000 a year, but you can get dedicated feeds from advanced threat intel firms, $500,000 a year. So the big banks can afford that, the small organizations can't. So this does present a bit of a challenge because, in a targeted attack, the small firm could be the vector into the big one.
Question.
I'm Lawrence Carew from the International Energy Partnership. I'm involved. I'm here because of smart grids. Do O's and ones and knock us down. I saw Snowden Saturday night, which is an amazing story if it's all true. But the Guardian was there filming it as he's speaking, telling the story. But anyway, the point is, how can somebody like Yahoo get hacked the other day? I mean, millions of people's information was taken. I mean, this has been going on. These situations have been going on for years. Why haven't they been protected? No, I don't understand. That's for anybody.
Well, that one was years ago, actually.
Yahoo?
Yeah, it was announced recently, but they are dating it back at least a couple of years. Like every firm is we work. Here's an example of Canada working with the U.S. We hired the former 3-star that ran the cyber command at DISA and created hunting teams. He says publicly a $9.4 billion budget and 14,000 staff, and they're hacked continuously. So it's it doesn't matter what you do. You have to sort of get your head into a different frame that you're going to get hacked. So the emphasis nowadays has to be on how do you detect and contain that so it doesn't become a business altering event. This happens in the government networks and the House, the Senate. Like these things happen all the time. The fact that Yahoo's they probably were not aware of it until perhaps the due diligence in the recent deal. I don't know. That's speculation on my part. But don't be surprised. Like when the Chinese were very upset with the political accusations that journalists had uncovered back, this is probably 4 years ago, where it was alleged that politicians making $30,000 a year shouldn't be driving $250,000 Mercedes. And that was some journalistic work, if you remember, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and the Aurora hack at Google. So Google has phenomenal resources. Everybody is a victim with a motivated adversary, and so it's a reality. So you have to take a lot more into your own hands in terms of protecting what data you put in there, how you keep it encrypted or not. The best practices, to the Snowden thing, is you encrypt everything at rest. Well, obviously the top, offensive cyber agency in the world didn't. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to get all of that. So there's lots to be said there. The power grid, though, I do find I'm an engineer in SCADA. It's how I was trained. That one scares me more than anything. The power grid, smart grids have phenomenal opportunity if done right, but security is actually being baked into. I'm aware of the projects. Some of the biggest ones actually happen in Canada, first British Columbia and now some of the other provinces. So a lot of the learning was done by the biggest firms in the industry, such as Itron and Schlumberger and so forth. And one thing they have done is used IPv6, which does put a much better level of security. I don't see that becoming the new norm at any time soon. It was going to fix everything 20 years ago, and it still hasn't happened. So there are things, and people very worried about it, things being done and people worried about it, but you're right to be concerned about that. That to me, a couple of electrical engineers and a couple of hackers, morally corrupt, would be able to do significant damage, and that's still true today, unfortunately.
I do want to ask a quick question about cost, because it came up as one of the challenges that small businesses are trying to wrestle with in terms of how much to spend. Is it too expensive? So I'd like to hear from your perspectives what your recommendations, what you say to these small businesses when they say it's too costly. We heard in one of the earlier panels, when it comes to resources, one of the mitigating options are managed security services, right? So outsource some of that. When it comes to cost, what are some of your suggestions or solutions that you recommend?
Well, and this is my personal thought from dealing with a lot of the businesses. I think we're really scaring them by talking about some of the costs. The cost that's really important is the cost that they will have to incur if they don't do the preventive measures, if they don't do the risk assessments, if they don't do the things early, then that's the cost to their business. But they look at, I think what they're looking at is, well, I have to revamp, just from a general perspective, well, I'm going to have to revamp my entire computer system without having the assessment done first. Their costs, each business is different. Each business is, of course, individual. The cost needs to be customized to what's actually needed. But I think, what they're hearing is that, it's going to cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars from the onset before that assessment is even done. It could cost that. It could cost $500. It could cost $1,000. What we're hoping to do is form another partnership or program with the Small Business Administration to hopefully cover a portion or provide a mechanism to assist small businesses with some of that potential cost if it gets to be exorbitant for some of them. So, I think the cost just depends on what the assessment comes out to be.
Yes, SBA, I like that idea.
Don't tell them I said that. Right?
Did you want to say something? We have a few more questions.
Okay. Prevention, it's cheaper than the correction. It's a good inversion.
Thank you. You had a question? No, right here, right in the front, and then I'll get you in the back. Thanks.
Hi, Quentin Hodgson with MITRE Corporation. First of all, I've tried to make the argument about prevention being much more cost effective than the cure, but that really is a hard sell, and I think everybody knows that. What I wanted to ask about is when it comes to managed security services, the question of how can you advise people on what to actually expect and what to demand in terms of service levels agreements and so forth, because particularly for small businesses, they may be just looking at, I went and bought something from the store and it came with, such and such security software already preloaded, and I thought that was it. But if you're actually going to advise the small and medium-sized businesses about what kind of levels of agreement that they should be expecting from these, because that can drive the cost, particularly in sort of, I know you're going to say it's got to be a risk profile question, but could you kind of expand on that, I guess, to the two of you?
Yeah, I could start. The term MSSP, Managed Security Service Provider, is very broad. So you've got, there's a whole category in there of what we'd call business process outsourcing, which is just managing the devices, keeping the firewalls, policies current, or making, or patches current and making policy changes, as a simple example. So there's a range for how fast you get notified, and it's how much you spend. And this is, we're a little different. I'll explain that in a second. But basically managing all of the devices that you've acquired from many different suppliers. There's a fee associated with that. If they detect something, they will notify you by the end of the day, or if you pay more, they'll notify you within the hour. So there's, your mileage varies depending on how much you pay. The other side of that is on the threat detection and mitigation, and we have we call it a service level objective. So by definition, your perimeter's been compromised when we get engaged. So you've already been hacked. So it's how fast can we detect and contain it. So we measure that internally. We instrument it. We average about 10 minutes to detect and about 35 seconds on the triage as to whether it's potentially business altering or not. And we've built our whole processes around that. That's far more expensive. The MSSP device management of all levels, we would be 150% or more of what they would charge. So if you can't manage devices yourself, you need that. Plus you need breach detection that we do. So that's it's a sort of a vague answer, but it costs more. The SLAs on threat detection tend to be different. You work on service level objectives versus service level agreements. And then if we fail on our ability to detect because our devices are down, then that's service credit territory. That's how it works in managed anything. If you fail to deliver the service, you provide credits back to the customer, and there's all kinds of formulas for that. Does that answer?
You pointed to time to response and cost, but as a small business, how do I know what makes sense for me, right? So an hour of detection from when the breach happens is obviously better than a day, but how do I know that that's actually valuable to me as a business?
I think it'll depend on who you're doing it for. If you're doing it for yourself, as I was saying earlier, but this will become far clearer over the next couple of years, a lot of the drivers in small business are your big customers. So if you have a bank, a federally regulated bank, asking a law firm to show what their breach detection response capabilities are, and they want to see it within the hour, that'll determine. And so a lot of the driver for small business is coming from the large enterprises, not exclusively, but it is actually switching from cost to top line. You can no longer do business with us if you don't do this. So that actually will start to fill in the blanks. And I can get up on the soapbox. It's a tax on everything. Because of the scourge that is driving my business to our benefit, it's tax on and it's a flow-through cost. It'll get embedded in everything that we do going forward. Just the way that inventory shrinkage, which is about 1% of retail in the U.S., cybercrime is actually going to exceed that for the first time towards the end of this year, early next year, and that just gets embedded into everything that we buy. So the amount you have to spend varies on why you're doing it. If you had to, say you're doing something to tick a box, then you go with the minimum. If you actually, we're compliant but not necessarily secure. If you need that higher level, then you've got to match it to what your objectives are.
And I think earlier we were mentioning, or earlier I mentioned the DFARS, Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation, that DOD has put out. A requirement for them is you must report any cyber incident within 72 hours. Okay, so that seems like a long time, but that's just reporting to DOD. So I think I agree with Jay. It's going to have to be at some point a regulatory issue, and at some point an issue based on who you're doing business with. What are their requirements? If you're a supplier, for instance, Boeing Aerospace Support Center has formed a cybersecurity working group with their major primes as well as their suppliers. So they have come up with a 180-point assessment for those who are currently their suppliers and those who want to be their suppliers. So that dictates, if you want to be a supplier to that group, what you need to do and, what it might cost or not cost and things like that.
Thank you. Do we have time for a last question or not? There was a gentleman in the back. Okay. I'm sorry, no? Okay, sorry. Running out of time, but thank you very much for this interactive discussion. Thank you very much.